everyone, and thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. I'm Aseem Sood, Director of Investments at Temasek, a Singapore headquartered investment fund. And within the fund, I focus on investments into education. Our topic for today is public meets private, innovative government partnerships for workforce reskilling. With technologies and business models rapidly evolving, all organizations today are experiencing a step change in workforce skills required in order to stay relevant and to continue to grow. According to estimates, there will be more than 100 million workers globally who will have to change their occupations over the next decade. And over that same time frame, automation will free up a third of all working time for workers. With such large-scale change coming up, most organizations today already recognize that there exists a skills gap which they need to address in order for them to stay competitive in this changing landscape. And last but not the least, COVID-19 has certainly accelerated this trend. With significant unemployment currently, there is a large portion of the workforce, especially people who are working in travel, in tourism, in hospitality, traditional retail, who will need to reorient themselves. And with this, the topic of reskilling has gained even more urgency and focus. With this, we're fortunate to have our 4 panel members here for this discussion. Today, we have Tammy Westergard, who's the Nevada State Librarian, Kevin Mills, who's the head of government partnerships at Coursera, a leading online learning platform, Frank Kelley, who's the vice president at DAU, Defense Acquisition University, which focuses on training and learning programs for the defense acquisition workforce, and Mark Andersen, co-founder of Lifelike, a visual learning platform which uses AR and VR technologies to create interactive 3D learning content. Before we dig deeper into our discussion, I just wanted to ask you guys to maybe give a quick introduction for yourself and your organization. Maybe to start off with Tammy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Aseem, and it's so great to be here with everybody. I am Nevada's state librarian, and some people don't know that actually all 50 states have a state librarian. So I am to the people of the state of Nevada as the Librarian of Congress is to the people of the United States. And in my role, one of the functions is to help oversee what's called library development, and I work a lot with public libraries, school libraries, academic libraries, and special research libraries to, at this point, man, we are working on keeping kids learning and adults earning.
Awesome. Kevin?
Sure. Again, my name's Kevin Mills. I lead government partnerships at Coursera. Just for those of you not familiar with Coursera, we're one of the world's largest learning and upskilling platforms of online learning. We were founded 8 years ago by 2 Stanford computer science professors, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng, who had the vision to make the world's best education available to everyone anywhere. And in those 8 years, we've really started to realize that vision. So that first course out of Stanford has now grown to a catalog of over 4,000 courses, including certificate programs and fully online degree programs. These are all offered by 200 of our top university and corporate partners like Yale and Princeton and Stanford, as well as IBM and Cisco and Facebook and Google. And then these courses are now being taken by over 71 million learners around the world. And we now have about 3,000 top companies who are using the Coursera platform to upskill their employees, about 5,000 college campuses using Coursera to help upskill their students. And we have about 400 government agencies, and those are who I work with, that are using Coursera to either upskill their public sector employees to make sure they have the digital skills they need to do their jobs, or their broader workforce to help them have the skills and the credentials to then get hired and back into the earning, as Tammy said. So it's an honor to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. That is really phenomenal reach. I'll pass it over to you, Frank, next.
Hey, Aseem, thanks very much. And I really want to thank the folks at ASU GSV for asking DAU to participate in this. And I really want to thank you, Aseem, for not making me follow Tammy, by the way, who has turned librarians for me into like a superhero. Kevin and I have had a chance to talk before, and I'm really super interested to hear what Mark has to say. about the VR and AR world in the future. These are all terribly exciting things for us. You may not know a lot about DAU. I've only been there myself for about 2 years. We're headquartered in Northern Virginia, actually on an Army installation, Fort Belvoir. DAU has 5 regions and two colleges, and our regions are in the West Coast in San Diego. We come into Huntsville, Dayton, Ohio, Pax River, Maryland, and then we have one of our regions tucked with us in our headquarters unit right there at Fort Belvoir. We have 2 colleges, the College of Contract Management that's in Southern Virginia, and then also our Defense Systems Management College that's headquartered with us at Fort Belvoir. We have about 650 employees to train a defense acquisition workforce of about 183,000. So it's quite a task. Of course, making it even more challenging has been the last year. But hats off to our president, Jim Woolsey, who 18 months ago saw that DAU had to change because the work we're doing for the defense acquisition workforce had to change. And he's really built it around 3 pillars. And he's not only thought about this himself, but he's taken a page out of other government agencies, but also out of the playbook of entrepreneurs. And those pillars are effortless learning, world-class content, and a dynamic network. And so if you're at an event like this, you don't have to be just into government to take advantage of some of the things that DAU provides. We look forward to serving whatever your needs are, but also in partnering with you in the future and serving the needs of our defense acquisition workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And then just moving on to Mark.
Thank you, Aseem, to you and to ASU GSV. I'm struck by, I really want to listen to my 3 panelists. I realize I actually have to participate here, but they sound fascinating. So I am one of the co-founders of Lifelike, and we have created, we're a startup. I'm in San Francisco. We've created over these many years, the world's largest digital STEM library. And then we started in education because one of my co-founders is dyslexic. And when he was a boy in school, he would really struggle just reading so much text, textbook after textbook after textbook. And he just really didn't feel like visual learning was getting its just due. So that's where he had the idea. And then one of my other co-founders, he actually came out of what's called AAA gaming, and he's created some blockbuster gaming hits worldwide. And then he and his wife had their first child, and he said, you know what? I don't want to create any more violent games. I want to create something that my child can really be proud of me for creating. And so that's why he became one of the co-founders of Lifelike. And then our other co-founders is generally considered one of the leading 3D artists in the world. I don't code, I'm not a 3D artist. So I don't create, I can take zero responsibility for what we've created, but we have an extraordinary team of Czechs and Slovaks they're in Brno, the Czech Republic, and they create everything that we do, and the partnership that we've created for, thanks to Tammy.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, and thanks for all of you guys for participating. I think we all got the opportunity to touch base together about a week or so ago, and it was really fascinating what came out of that discussion. So I'm certainly looking forward to this one. And I wanted to start off maybe just with the topic which kind of ends up dominating most discussions today, which is COVID-19, and just trying to understand as to how the impact of COVID-19 has been on learning patterns. And maybe understand from Tammy and Frank to start off with, has COVID-19 led to a greater recognition for the need for workforce reskilling, as well as maybe just to understand if it's led to an increased appetite for remote learning partnerships, partnering with companies which might have been on the periphery of people's thought before. And I'm just curious as to how the thinking internally, both at libraries as well as DAU, has evolved.
Is it okay, Frank, if I start? Is that okay? Okay. Well,
ladies first.
Thank you for the question. To answer that quickly, COVID has absolutely accelerated the need to keep students learning and adults earning in the most profound way in the state of Nevada. As you mentioned earlier, we are definitely among the statistic of individuals whose jobs are not going to be coming back. And one of Nevada's priority industries is healthcare. The population center in the state of Nevada is in Clark County, which is the Las Vegas Valley. The in-demand need for healthcare workers is acute. The College of Southern Nevada is our partner in the project that we're going to talk a little bit more about right now. But with the resources that were created from Lifelike, we have been able to help displaced workers in real time. We just completed the first cohort using those 3D resources. They're the first individuals to use these in a program of instruction to become a dialysis technician in the world. We started this pilot project over 2 years ago. We had no way of knowing that this was going to become the answer to helping those displaced workers stay on their learning path. And because of the assets that were created by Lifelike and because of accessibility to them through the public library, the College of Southern Nevada was able to continue this program of study when they actually were shuttering many of their programs across the board. But they made the decision that the allied healthcare programs had to continue for obvious reasons. And so we were able to keep that going. And we have a cohort of individuals who are now working as dialysis technicians in the Las Vegas Valley when previously they had been Uber drivers or they were working in the food and beverage and entertainment industry. So there you go.
And Frank, maybe just to hear from you as to the evolution of DAU's thoughts around that, and we'll certainly come back to we'll certainly come back to the College of Southern Nevada and the collaboration with Lifelike as well.
So I knew I'd eventually have to follow Tammy. So so anyway, it's fascinating stuff, and there I am taking notes again. So for DAU, our president Jim Woolsey is always very careful to talk about COVID and recognizing that the COVID is a tragedy for sure, but it's also something that's created a lot of opportunities for DAU in many ways, and of course you never want to let an opportunity fall to the wayside. So we essentially with Woolsey's blessing or order, we were told that we're going to shut down our classroom training. And by the way, DAU is a brick and mortar institution. We were very proud of the fact that we would bring students in, bring them into a classroom, and we teach them. Now that was what we were most proud of, and we would graduate about 45,000 students a year out of the classroom environment. The funny little secret is that we were actually graduating from courses about 800,000 folks, or at least 800,000 graduations in courses. So think about that, the scale that we already had there. But we really were all about the classroom environment. And then Woolsey said, hey, we're going to shut down. We got to figure out another way to do this. And so we were literally left there thinking about how are we going to convert this classroom experience to being able to take advantage of the technology that's out there today. And of course, you can imagine that things were a little slow in the beginning, but then we got caught up. And I would say right now, I know that we've recovered, which is a word that I know that Tammy has used about rescuing some of the folks that are out there in Nevada in terms of skills for them. For us, recovery rescuing was rescuing these seats because the defense acquisition workforce needed to be ready, right? It's one of the tenets of our defense national strategy. And right now we're sitting at around 88%. We predict by the end of the calendar year, we'll probably be over 90% of those seats saved. And that's incredible. So that's made us sort of rethink, how do we generate speed? The other thing for us has been scale. So being able to take advantage and tap into events like this is something that we didn't normally think about in the past. And I would say with scale also comes the ability to make contact. I mean, I would tell you if this never happened, I probably would not have ever met Tammy. okay, probably wouldn't have known what Mark was doing at all. And for Kevin, we probably would have gone along. We have a relationship with Coursera that's really positive. Well, you know what? When you're something like Coursera and you can go to 70 million people, okay, I mean that's tap into that. So it made us rethink speed, rethink scale, rethink outreach, so that we can engage in partnerships in the future.
Got it. Thank you. And sorry, go for it, Kevin.
Oh, I just if it's on that topic, if you don't mind, if I
of course
chime in. But yeah, I would echo kind of what Frank said. I mean, just as so many brick and mortar institutions all of a sudden had to shut down, that didn't mean learning stopped. It just moved online. And so, kind of if you look at the headlines and then watch kind of Coursera enrollments, it was sort of as the news broke about all the shutdowns, it was just spikes in enrollments. So we saw enrollments sort of go up 5 to 15 times kind of normal on our platform in the months after the pandemic kind of started, and actually had about 54 million enrollments just since March. So just massive move to online learning is what we saw in COVID. And I would just mention how Coursera responded was really leaning into that, and especially on the government side. What we did was, when we saw that shift happening and the spike in unemployment, which is the other major impact of COVID beyond the health crisis, we made our Coursera for Government platform free to governments for their displaced or unemployed workers. So our platform fee, which is typically $300 to $400 per person, we kind of waived that charge through the end of 2020, and through that we saw amazing uptake from governments on behalf of their citizens. So we have governments from about 100 countries around the world kind of raise their hand and take advantage of this program, and then make it available to many of their displaced and unemployed workers. And we've seen over 2 million enrollments in that program, primarily in job relevant. There's just been a real aim at job relevant credentials and content. And so on our platform, we've seen that some of the top programs have been the Google IT Support Certificate, which is a program taught by Google that takes you from zero tech experience, zero college, into an entry-level IT support role. And then another one that was really phenomenal was a COVID contact tracing course taught by Johns Hopkins. They put it together very quickly. As soon as we realized that was a job that needed to, just the speed of how the economy, a new job invented. And we had about 1 million people sign up for that course in just the first 2 to 3 months since it launched. So certainly COVID has been devastating for the world and the country, but it has proven a boon to kind of digital learning and digital acceleration.
Got it. And that is, it's certainly great to hear of the customers sign up and just sort of the enrollment onto the Coursera platform. I'm just curious as to, is some of that also reflected on the enterprise side, or when you're talking about, let's say, the government side, just in terms of an ongoing relationship and how that transition and that conversation is ongoing?
Yeah, certainly. So the overall demand has been across the board. So our corporate customers, our government customers like DAU, they're seeing more demand as they're moving online. Our university, that's another story. So many universities, brick and mortar universities, had to quickly go online, and we went from really a handful of customers to now 5,000 universities. Just overnight, massive demand for that. On the government side, obviously the initial program has been free, just in times of desperation. We didn't want to worry about procurement and all the delays that can happen with government. What we're seeing has been a tremendous benefit, because so many governments have now had a chance to try it, use it, see their citizens really enroll, uptake, get the job relevant skills they need. And so we're kind of now in the process where governments are putting in place the longer term planning and using the funding mechanisms that take some time with government to really procure and get long-term partnerships in place. So we've seen it as a very positive thing for Coursera and for the partners we work with.
Got it. And then I think, just coming back to Mark for a little bit, I did want to hear just how the conversation with potential customers has been for you, and how it's evolved over the past 6 to 12 months, and certainly hear more about the initiative with Tammy and with the College of Southern Nevada, and just how that whole thing came about. It is it feels like an opportunity to do good for all, right? It's creating employment, it's helping business for you guys, and it's in healthcare. So it seems like there is a lot of positivity with that, but I was just curious as to how that came about and how that whole process came together.
Sure, and I'm really impressed. Just I'm thinking about the power of an idea, and just this all started because of an idea that Tammy had. So I've been saying to anyone that will listen for the last couple of years that in my opinion, Tammy is the most innovative state librarian in America. And she'll, a little bit later on, she has some new information, a massive grant that the state of Nevada just won that she was a co-leader on. But this project as well with the dialysis technician certification program at the College of Southern Nevada was Tammy's idea. And if you don't mind, Aseem, because it was Tammy's idea, I'd love to have her describe it because she can do it justice best, and then I can add on to that.
Of course.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Essentially, the opportunity germinated because the state of Nevada was actually following the lead of the state of California in its deployment of the emerging technology in public libraries. So under the leadership of the California State Librarian, Greg Lucas, as well as a library consortia known as Khalifa, the executive director, Paula McKinnon, and then the board chair, Sarah Jones, really worked hard to bring virtual reality into public libraries. And so it first started with getting librarians acquainted with the hardware and the software and all of those pieces, and then standing up front of the house programs that people in the community could come and enjoy and experience the power of immersive learning and just the visual nature of it. I'm sure lots of people have seen Ready Player One, and it really is that cool. And so from that, one of the things that I was wanting to do was to build on what had been learned in California and to bring that into the classroom. So when we deployed it in Nevada, we had an emphasis on libraries' equal education, that we had to use this content in partnership with teachers and with professors. And then I also wanted to focus it further on STEM learning, because that is where living wage jobs exist across the country, is with STEM skills. And STEM is very abstract and it can be difficult to learn and to understand. And so from that sort of add-on to being the second state in the country to deploy this in public libraries, the state library, we also were a part of the pilot. So I was building the plane and flying in it at the same time. And the partnership with the College of Southern Nevada lent itself to the state library walking its own talk about having an expectation that it was going to advance learning in a classroom with a teacher. And then from that, I did with Mark and other partners who created a sort of a curated collection of resources that we deployed in the classroom to drive learning. And then COVID hit and the pivot to online instruction. But for this complement of resources, CSN would not have been able to keep those individuals learning in the program. Does that sound about right, Mark?
That sounds exactly right. And if I can, yes, Tammy, and if I can just add to that. So basically, because I run Lifelike on a daily basis with my colleague, Tosh, and what we found is we had actually, Tammy's absolutely right, we started working with Sarah Jones and John McLeod in California first. It was their idea to put virtual reality into libraries, and they did, thanks to Greg Lucas. And then when Tammy doubled down on that and said, well, let's really just put this apply this for workforce development as well. That's how everything happened that Tammy just described. What I would mention is, to your very original question, Aseem, COVID obviously has been devastating economically. And there are many states that are still, they have double-digit unemployment, and it's hurt. Statistically speaking, it's hurt our brothers and sisters most who have their high school diplomas but have not taken any college credits. So if someone has their associate's degree, they do better financially, and more so if they have their bachelor's and so on. And so it's these jobs, a lot of these jobs are never coming back. And so what opportunities exist out there? And that's really what's so powerful about this dialysis technician certification program. It's a 12-week program, so it's fast. It's not, we're talking about months or let alone years. It's a 12-week program at CSN. And additionally, it's for anyone that has their high school diploma or equivalency. And in Nevada, the minimum wage is $8.10 an hour. I don't know how does a single dad or a single mom raise a family on $8.10 an hour? I don't know. But what I do know is that for all these dialysis technicians have been graduating successfully from the College of Southern Nevada, and that we're just in this cohort that are in our pilot. They on average are starting then about $16 an hour. So they're more or less doubling their wages, and then there are 3 pay grades above that. So this is not about just getting people back into some minimum wage job. So, this is about a career. This is about building a really economic mobility and really building a career while saving lives. I mean, it's win-win-win for high school graduates. And these people, because if someone's on COVID, if they are on dialysis, they need to be on dialysis. And if they're not being dialyzed, excuse me for being so blunt, but they will not live. And they have to be dialyzed. And that's what these dialysis technicians are doing. They're saving lives every single day, and they're building a great career at the same time.
Got it. And then it is certainly a fascinating project, and it certainly feels like it's doing so much good, and it's also doing it at a time when it's expressly needed. I think this is, it certainly stands to reason to speak more about this. But I was curious to learn both from Mark, maybe Kevin as well, just as to when you guys think about sort of working along with governments and partnering with governments, I think part of the worry or part of the question for folks always has been just as to what is an efficient way to navigate the system. And, I think sometimes things take time. And even at the point in time, like right now in COVID, where maybe there is a lot of intent and there's a lot of folks pushing together in the right direction to try and get things done. Is there guidelines, or is there sometimes, parties you've talked to and it felt like, hey, this is usually always a good source to reach out to, or what has been, what's worked well and what has been some of the constraints in working with governments? And then, I think to come back to Tammy and Frank, maybe to ask that question from the other side after that.
Yeah. I'm happy to share my initial thoughts. I mean, probably the short answer is find people like Tammy. Find those visionary people that see the vision, because they can unlock the machinery to actually make things happen. I would say, if you don't find the Tammy, at least give the means to show a picture for what the future can look like. Because I think what you run into with government, or really any entity, but oftentimes with government, is that's not the way the system has done it. That's not the way we always operate. And so it's very hard to move things that are different. And so that takes, on the part of, if it's Coursera or a different, showing that vision, and then you find that vision match with someone like Tammy, and then you can do something amazing. And so I think that's the main thing. And then, so I think from the advice of companies or vendors like Coursera, it's really understand the current model, so that you can understand where the person's coming from and talk their language so they trust you. Then really go from there to shaping what the vision looks like. Have them poke holes in it, have them really start to understand it, own it, and then move forward. And if you need to take an impediment for the short term, and kind of with the workforce recovery initiative, budget and procurement was a little bit of a short-term blocker. By removing that in this kind of emergency environment, it's allowed a lot of the visionary leaders like Tammy to now have a way to prove people like this isn't just an idea or a concept, this is a reality. Look at how we're, one stat that has struck me in working with governments in the workforce recovery, one particular state had launched Coursera, and we saw how many learners workers were taking advantage of it. We said, how's that going? And they say, well, to help last year when unemployment was less than half of what it is this year with the pandemic, only 4% of those unemployed people took advantage of any of our state supplied training and workforce development. So 4%, I mean 96% of unemployed were getting nothing. And so when you can show a new kind of concept where, and this is I think so important for workforce, is having that scale built in, that online. I actually think most workforce should now think online first. Like what's the common ground that we can spend tens of dollars on versus thousands of dollars that we could supply to every unemployed person, many of which will be able to take this resource, be self-motivated, complete, get a credential, and get hired for a low cost to the state. But there's going to be some people who need additional coaching, mentoring, in-person supports, and use that saved budget to support those in conjunction with community colleges, in conjunction with nonprofits, in conjunction potentially with libraries, who can add those support layers. So I kind of think the new model has to be think scalable online as the baseline, and then layer in the added support on top of that. And I think that is a vision that a lot of state workforce and visionaries like Tammy are starting to come out of the woodwork and be like, yeah, I get that, I like that, let's make that happen.
Got it. Understood. And I think this ties in pretty well with Frank, what you had mentioned as to the 3 pillars for DAU in terms of trying to have a dynamic network. And just as to thinking, when I'm thinking about it as to Kevin's point around trying to find the right people within the system and trying to find the Tammys, I guess the idea here, I'm just curious as to when you think about cultivating a dynamic network, what have been some of the forums which have been useful, and what are some of the tools which have been useful, and how you guys thought about going and creating that network for yourselves?
I'm going to tell you right now, Aseem, you just set me up. So I know that I have 2 people that are online right now from DAU. One of them is Sam Parks. He's actually here to provide my adult supervision to make sure I don't get off the reservation. And then there's another one, Dr. Marina Theodotou. I'm going to talk about both of these people real quick. So Sam Parks is not really faculty at DAU. He's not an instructional systems designer at DAU. And somebody like Sam Parks, because of the skills he already has and the fact that he's willing to try to do new things. I mean, no is not in this man's vocabulary. He will say, we will make it happen, okay? He is going to become that new, and as I think of the future that Kevin described, that new critical worker that we're going to have at DAU that is going to be able to tie things together, the creative elements from an instructional systems designer to somebody who's going to deliver it to a classroom, to somebody who's going to be able to say, to troubleshoot IT, right? So Sam partnered up with one of our great faculty by the name of Michelle Currier. And Michelle Currier said, okay, I'm stuck in a classroom. I can't get to the 30 people that I normally do at a time. And then she said, but there's this group of people in the contracts community in government, and we call them contracting officers representatives. They get little love. There's a lot of work that they have to do. We don't do enough for them. She said, I can get to them. And Sam and Michelle got together, and unheard of for us at DAU, they got to 1,000 of them on an event to where Michelle and Sam didn't provide the instruction. They actually went out because of the contacts that they had with the Army, found an expert in a particular field of research that needed some help. And it was actually in the employment of an application, to be perfectly honest. This guy was the owner of the application. You don't get more expert than that, okay? Brought him in to talk to 1,000 people. They call these things core cafes. So it was a cafe designed around reaching out to these contracting officers representatives. It was an incredible success. There was no way that Jim Woolsey could say, we're never going to do that one again. So we did it again. This time we had to change the license that we had for our tool that we used to reach out so that we could get to 1,500 people. And I assume, so this is the way these people want to engage DAU. There is no turning back for us. Dr. Marina Theodotou, she runs a webcast series called Think Differently, which is great. She kind of took something that we were doing, changed the title of it, and really wanted people to think in a big new way. She recently had in July did a thing called digital, I'm going to blow it, workforce digital readiness. Love that, because National Defense Strategy, the NDS, I blew that the last time, talks about being ready. That's the first tenet. And here was a beautiful opportunity that she sees to get our workforce digitally ready. So if you were to ask me, like, what's the low-hanging fruit right now in terms of upskilling, reskilling? I'm going to say it's being ready digitally, okay, so that we can do all these things we have to do. And then I think one of the things that I learned when we were doing some stuff with Coursera is data literacy is really huge. So digital readiness, data literacy, and then you probably just take off after that. But this is one of the things that Marina Theodotou was able to do with her series of Think Differently webcasts. And I can't really, I think she had like over 800 people on that particular one. I might be wrong, but that is not outside the realm of possibility for us. Before, we would only think about 30 people at a time, to be perfectly honest. So scale, speed, outreach, it's been an awakening for us, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Thank you. And I think this dovetails into one of the questions I had for Tammy, and I think it's also a question which sort of came to us from some of the audience. I did want to hear more about the grant which for Nevada State and how that whole thing came about, as well as one of the questions which is coming up is just as you think about sort of evaluating and reaching out to different platforms and saying how should we be utilizing this grant, what are some of the key parameters you guys would look out for? And I think the question from some of the audience members also is just that, are some of the decisions which are being made right now in a COVID-influenced landscape, how do you think that they will be sustained, and how do you think they hold up in a post-pandemic world? And how do you sort of think about both the short term and the long term?
Got it. Those are all great questions. And actually building on what Frank was talking about that bridges into the answer, as we know, libraries are all about literacy. We have been in this space from the get-go. And digital literacy has been an area of focus for libraries for 30 years. And the digital divide is very real in terms, and when we think about skill sets and we think about our the comparison to being a literate individual, we know that we all first learn to read and then we read to learn for the rest of our lives. So it's the same thing, and technology and these skills, continues to change. So our ability to remain literate and competent is really important, obviously. But libraries, our role in that is to foster access. So I'm not sure how many people know, but you can check out a hotspot from libraries in the state of Nevada, and that's not unusual across the country. And you can pull into a parking lot. I bet many people have done that before when they needed to hop on Wi-Fi and get access to the library's Wi-Fi from the parking lot. So, but it's not perfect. Broadband access across the country, there are Wi-Fi deserts. In fact, I bet you guys will all be surprised to know that the worst access in the state of Nevada is actually within a section of North Las Vegas. So in the most metropolitan area in our state are the internet connections. So solving for that is a challenge of government and industry and certainly educational partners. And the best part, one of the best parts about the problem of COVID is that we all know a well-defined problem is a problem half solved. So when we are trying to keep students learning, we are truly working with K-12 especially, able to find out exactly which families and individuals need to be able to check out that hotspot or need to be able to get access to a device. We also check out internet connectable devices of all kinds. In fact, at the University of Nevada, Reno, And much of this virtual reality work has been built on the efforts that were born out of the University of Nevada. Dr. Todd Colgrove was the lead VR